Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Friday night, December the 10th. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. It's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and I have the link in there, and it's what I want to talk about tonight. And glad to be able to do the show. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate everybody who's listening to my shows. Let's see. We were looking at verbal abuse, actually, for the last week. And I want to change the topic here. I ran across some really interesting stuff on a website. I'll give you that link here in a minute. But I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows. Mainly I'm a survivor of child abuse myself. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're working really steady, to stop child abuse. We're all volunteers, and we do what we can within our own abilities, to get the word out, spread the education, the awareness to stop and prevent child abuse, right? So, you have to listen at your own discretion, right? I'm talking about abuse on my shows. All of my shows are sensitive, right? So you have to listen at your own discretion and know what's good for you to listen to. If the show, if this type of material would bother you or make you uncomfortable, it really is your discretion, to turn it off or just don't listen to the show, because ultimately you're responsible for what you listen to. So if you think the topics of abuse might bother you, just turn the show off, and you would not be hurting my feelings at all. And young people under the age of 18, you have to have permission to listen to my shows, mainly because there's adult content on my shows, and I don't know how young the children are who are listening to my shows. So I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you to make sure that it's something they feel is appropriate for you to listen to, and they can help you decide whether you should listen or not, right? I would hope everybody would do that. And young people, especially young people under the age of 18 and under, please, be careful what you're doing online. There's a lot of sick individuals out there. The FBI.gov has a great website. The FBI, I love this website. I go there quite a bit to research the information, because they are working with ICAC and a whole bunch of other, federal groups and local groups to stop online sexual predators, right? So, you can go to that website, FBI.gov, and you can get the information on how to keep yourself safe when you're online. And it's so important because children, you have the right to protection, and you have the right to safety and security, and yet there are tens of thousands, of child sexual predators and pedophiles online trying to get a hold of children all the time. So, the FBI and ICAC and these other groups are trying to bust these people, but in the meantime, children are getting hurt, and there's always a potential that, a child could be a victim of one of these predators, because children are vulnerable, and they really, if they don't have the education and the information, and they're not, being looked after properly, children can give away too much information. They might go meet these people thinking that it's a kid their own age, and then it turns out to be some sort of a sexual predator, child sexual molester, or predator gets a hold of them and sexually assaults these children. So young people, if you're listening to this, you get the information on how to stay safe online. That information is everywhere. Internet safety, just type into your browser, internet safety, online safety for children. Parents, get the information, educate yourselves, and then educate your children, because kids, they're very, very smart, and they know probably a whole lot more about computers than any adult does, and but they might not know just how sick and twisted a lot of people are who would pose as a teenager or pose as a child and try to get information out of your child. They might not realize this. So educate yourself and educate your children, and keep yourself safe, right, when you're online. And I have a chat room here open, and anytime there's a chat room present, kids under the age of 18, you need to be very careful what you're doing in chat rooms, and you need to be responsible. Take the responsibility on for yourself, if you're old enough to do this, and read that information on how to keep yourself safe online. I cannot stress that enough. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll get right into this topic here. I want to talk about why do people. And this is something that, I question. This is a question I ask myself all the time, because I'm a survivor of abuse, and I know the situations that were going on in my home. I took a really good look at the situation and to understand what was happening in the home, and why, it doesn't necessarily tell me why my parents did what they did, but what it does is it shows me the circumstances that were surrounding all of the abuse, and so I can kind of see where, the information out there is, that for any number of reasons parents abuse their children, or parents, husband, wives abuse each other, right? Boyfriends, girlfriends. People abuse people and there's generally a set of circumstances around it, whether they have no coping skills, they might have been abused themselves, they might be using alcohol or illegal drugs, or even prescription drugs. They might have substance abuse problems. They might have mental illness or emotional problems. They might have anger management problems. They might be taking their frustrations out on their family members and other people around them just because maybe they lost their job or they didn't get the promotion that they wanted, or the family members are just driving them nuts and they just can't take it anymore and they lash out at their family. And sometimes it's purely for their own enjoyment. People sexually use their children, make videos and trade the videos online. People abuse for many, many reasons, right? And so I wanted to take a look at this article, and I found this article, it's on mentalhelp.net, and that's www.mentalhelp.net. And this particular article is called Why Do People Abuse? And it's from Catherine Petricelli, Patricelli, M.A., Understanding Abuse. And this is a little bit of it's an older article from 2005, but it doesn't matter because it's really some good information. She says here, understanding abuse. People have difficulty understanding the motives of people who are involved in abuse. Why people choose to abuse other people is a common question. And why adult people who are being abused choose to stay in abusive relationships is another. Neither of these questions have easy answers, and even the strongest attempt to educate yourself as to why people might make these seemingly irrational choices will not lead to complete understanding. She says here, abuse situations must be lived in and experienced before their internal logic makes any sense. However, we can try to do our best to understand. And so she says here, why do people abuse? The first question, why do people abuse other people, has multiple answers. So she says here, some abusers learn to abuse from their parents. Their early history consisted of receiving abuse themselves and or seeing others abused, one parent abusing the other or their sibling, etc. As a consequence, abuse is the normal condition for these people. Such people internalized a particular relationship dynamic, namely the complementary roles of abuser and victim. They are familiar with and fully understand the terror of being the helpless victim from their own childhood experience. And the opposite of being a victim is not simply opting out of abuse, it is instead to be an abuser. Given a choice between being the out-of-control victim or the in-control abuser, some of these people grow up to be the abuser. As they become adults, they simply turn this relationship dynamic around and start acting out the abuser side of the relationship dynamic. They've learned. So by choosing to be the aggressor and abuser, they may get their first sense of taking control over their own destiny and not being at the mercy of others. That they hurt others in the process may go unregistered or only occur as a dim part of their awareness. I find this so interesting because as a survivor myself, and thinking about my parents' behaviors towards each other as well as towards their children, and especially particularly my mom's behavior, which affected me on every level. She was abused as a child, and she always felt that she was the victim, and then she married, I talk a lot about it on my morning show if anybody wants to catch the one child abuse survivor to another, but she then married a man, that marriage turned sour very quickly, and because he was an abusive man, he's mentally ill, he still is, and so the thing is she very much felt like she was the victim and always the victim, and I think in turn abused her children and mainly me. She didn't so much pick on my brothers all that much. She loved her sons very much, and it was mainly me, and I would say even maybe my sister, my next sister who's next to me in age. So, but it was mainly directed at me, and I know because she made it clear to me that I was born out of rape, and that she did not want me, right? That was easy for her to do then, to take her frustrations out on me, right? And the thing is that I think that I could see this in her where she didn't want to be the victim anymore, so she became abusive herself, and that way she could at least be in control of something in her life. So she was abusive to me in every way, except for sexually, and she was, abusive to everyone really who would get in her path, right? Whether it was my dad, my parents were both abusing each other. It wasn't just my dad abusing my mom, right? They were both just very sick and twisted and ignorant, right, and hateful towards right? And so it's just interesting to see that could happen. A person who's abused as a child and grows up like that might take on the role of an abuser because, not always, but they might take on that role of abuser because they felt so helpless and out of control as a child, not having any control of their own body or their own lives. And they might, in order to have some control, become the abuser, right? So I can kind of see that in my mom because, she was always complaining about the fact that she was abused as a child. So you would think that she would have known not to abuse her own children. But that didn't seem to come into play for her. She didn't seem to relate that. Like she couldn't feel, she didn't feel that what she was doing was wrong, even though she was verbally and emotionally, psychologically abusing me as well as neglecting her as well. So, she couldn't associate that with her own abuse. I think it's because she was very much feeling a victim all the time. She just couldn't see that she was causing me to be a victim of her wrath, right? So that's the whole issue. And I think that happens to a lot of people. It's absolutely horrible, and that's the cycle of abuse, right? Abusive behavior, she says here, abusive behavior can also result from mental health issues or disorders. For example, someone with anger management issues, a diagnosis of intermittent explosive disorder, or a drinking or drug problem may easily get out of arguments. For example, because there is some their ability to inhibit themselves at the brain level and verbally or physically strike out at their partners and attendants, right? So, if they're drinking or using drugs, right, they don't realize, at a certain point that they've gone too far, they're crossing the line, they're physically or whether it's physical abuse or verbal abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, they don't see what they're doing, right? It's just like it could be because of the alcohol or because of the drugs. So that's a huge issue. And also with mental health issues. My dad's borderline schizophrenic, and he thought there was nothing wrong with treating my mom the way that he did. And even today, it feels like he was just the best husband ever. It's really quite interesting to see and to listen to what he has to say about my mom, right? Because my mom passed away a long time ago, like 15 years ago, and he's been on his own since. He never remarried or got into any other relationships. And so, it's funny to listen to what he has to say about my mom now and how much he loved her and but he will not take any responsibility for the way that he treated her, right? He thinks that he was just so wonderful. And there's a few of us that know a little bit different that are still living on the planet. I'm the only one speaking out and speaking up on behalf of all my family members who, on behalf of my whole family, right? Because it was just so destroyed by this dysfunctional, abusive environment my parents created for us, But the thing is it's just he's mentally ill. So he thinks he was just this wonderful husband and father, right? And he has apologized. He's the only one that did apologize for any of his behavior. He won't say, I'm sorry that I did this, or this. He just says, I'm sorry that, I did the best I could. But at least he did try to apologize, which I think is really good for somebody who's schizophrenic and an abuser, right? He doesn't necessarily feel bad about what he's done. That's a fact, because he doesn't really feel that he's done anything wrong, but he had so many of his children pointing it out to him when his kids were still alive. There's only 3 of us alive now, but there used to be 7 of us. And so, people throughout his lifetime have been pointing out to him, his behaviors and how wrong they were. And it's just kind of, I think that he feels, these people are saying that I'm this way, so I guess, you know what I mean? He's kind of just going along with it. I don't think he really feels bad about what he did. He doesn't recognize it. He thinks that he was a perfect husband, even though he raped his wife, abused her in every way. And his children, he abused his children. And this is the thing. He was busted on abuse charges, and he was brought up in court, And both my parents were, actually. And so that's the thing. It's like, if people don't want, if mental issues are a real problem, if they don't get those mental health and disorders in check, there's a possibility, and not always, but a possibility that they could hurt their children and then, not even know that they're hurting their children, not even realize it or recognize it because they can't feel empathy. They can't feel that connection, right? Something's missing. And that's really, really sad, but it's so true. And then she goes on to say, there's still other people who end up abusing because they have an empathy deficit, either because of some sort of brain damage or because they were so abused themselves as children that their innate empathetic abilities never developed properly. So it says such abusers cannot or will not relate to other people as people, choosing instead to treat them as objects. In fact, they confuse people for things. They treat people as though they were there solely for their convenience and do not otherwise have an independent, important life. And abusers who treat people in this manner are very likely psychologically ill and possibly medically ill as well. It says they may have an antisocial, sociopathic, psychopathic, or narcissistic personality disorder, and they may have anger or impulse control issues and substance abuse issues on top of that. So such people may abuse because of the benefits they receive from doing so. For instance, sexual or financial gratification, or the simple lure of power over people's lives. Think of any dictator that springs to mind, and you will have the personification of this type of individuals. Like, for instance, she says here, Saddam Hussein seems to fit well and comes to mind easily. The character of Tony Soprano from HBO's television series The Sopranos is also a good example of this type. What makes Tony's character so interesting to watch is that he is aware of his tendency towards narcissistic sociopathy and struggles against it at times with varying rates of success. So that's what she says there. But the thing is that's just the issue, you know. If people believe or think that their children are objects, you know, they're not going to feel any empathy for them. So when they hurt them, they don't really feel like it's a problem. Their child could be lying on the floor dying, literally dying in front of their eyes, but they don't feel that it's an issue because that baby or that child is an object. It's not a human life to them, right? So they don't feel the need to try to sustain life or to try to keep that child alive, right? And so many people are very sick and they do need mental health, you know, they do need some sort of health, you know, mental health care, you know, and it's very, very sad because you know that a lot of these people out here that you see these headlines roll out where people say that the devil told them to kill their children and stuff. Well, that was my dad. You know, my dad was he diagnosed schizophrenic. My mom was diagnosed not borderline, but manic depressive. And so between the two of them with these, you know, mental disorders and actual real, like, you know, schizophrenia and stuff like that, very harsh situation to bring up children in, right? A lot of paranoia and just a lot of depression, a lot of, you know, depressed states, and of course with my dad's paranoia and the devil, you know, I mean, my dad used to say that he would like that he should kill the whole family. Because the devil was, because God would like that because we were all from the devil. This was his way of rationalizing the whole thing. Like he's still very much sick, right? Nothing's changed. But the thing is, you know, this is what happens to kids. You know, their parents or someone in the family, you know, because they have these mental illnesses, you know, or psychosis, you know, they think that voices tell them to kill their children, you know, and they hear these voices say, you know, and because they need treatment. They need to be, you know, they need help, right? And it's like, so these, you know, they do end up killing their children or seriously injuring them. And, you know, I feared for my life as a child. I used to sleep with a knife, actually, after the age of 8 years old because I decided that if my mom found the knife under my bed, or, you know, I had under my mattress, actually, and I thought if she finds it, I'm dead. But if she doesn't find it, I mean, at least I have a chance to save my life, you know. Because I was pretty much convinced that my dad was going to kill us because he'd walk around in the middle of the night saying he was going to kill us all. And so that's a horrible way for people to, you know, to treat their children and won't get help. My parents were both ordered by the for their own mental health issues, as well as their marital problems, as well as anger management, because they had been brought up on child abuse charges, right? And so we were not removed from the home because they did not feel there was any, I guess, threat to our lives. They knew the abuse was happening, so we had social workers coming in for a couple of years. And the thing is that nothing was done, and my parents did not get any help or counseling, and they continued on in their very sick and twisted ways, and were allowed to do it, right? And then, you know, other people that knew their behaviors and knew they had been brought up on abuse charges just turned a blind eye to the abuse, right? And older siblings turned a blind eye because they were abused. So many times, you know, families, the whole, you know, dysfunction is just allowed to continue. And this is why we have this whole huge cycle of abuse, and why we have a society that thinks that it's no big deal that children should be abused and oh, it's just part of life. No, it's not. It's not. It shouldn't be. I don't care if people think it's part of life. Well, sadly enough, it's kids' realities is what it is. I know it was my reality. And so the thing is that does it make it right? No. And for people to even suspect or to know that there's abuse going on and to not do the right thing and make the phone call is so incredibly wrong. And it's wrong in every way. So that's the whole issue, right? Kids, if the parents aren't well enough, right, to be raising a large family with 7 children in it, then somebody needs to do something and step in on behalf of those children, right? And I mean, we even had CPS or DHS or whoever it was, and that was probably CPS, stepping in, and still nothing done, right? So this is the sad part. We're just lucky. I'm really glad to still be here, and that's the whole issue, right? I used to wish my mom would kill me. Because the physical beatings that she would put me through were pretty serious, and I used to just pray. I'd be like, go ahead and kill me. One last blow puts me out of my misery. Thank you. Well, she wouldn't do it, and so she would just abuse me and then not kill me. So, but then later on in life, I was actually really happy that she didn't kill me. So that's cool, and I'm very happy now. And I'm happy to still be here. And actually, 4 years ago, made the actual clear decision that I'm actually really glad to be here, and that I would not want to end my life or try to end my life and plan my own suicides anymore. So it took me to the age of 41 to figure that out. So that's why abuse is so incredibly serious. It's such a huge problem, and a lot of people like to minimize it. There's a lot of people out there that think, oh, just get over it, you should be able to just get over it. It's like, okay, for some people, if they can't feel and they're in denial, if you can live like that, more power to you. But a lot of us can't do that because we're not in denial, right? And so for people who choose to face it for what it really is and be honest with ourselves and honest with our own feelings and our own experiences, we can't just do that, right? We have to work through it. And so, some people do choose to remain in denial, and I believe it's a choice. People quite often will do that, and it seems to be possibly just the only way that they can cope. And so quite often you'll hear other people say, well, I was abused as a child and I'm just fine, and you guys should just get over it and stuff like this. And it's like, well, for some of us it's just not that easy, right? If it were, this would just be a perfect world. Good for those people who can do that. But there's a whole lot of us that have these issues, that kind of haunt us, not just me. Like, there's millions of survivors out here, and it's so incredibly sad what it does to people, and what it did to my mom. Just looking at what the abuse did to my mom, you know what I mean, and for her being abused as a child, and then going into this marriage, and looking at this broken woman who she died, and who was just so beaten down, you know what I mean, in every way. And so, she had some good times. She could laugh, and but at the end of the day, and on her deathbed, she was not happy with her life, and she really wanted so much more out of life, and didn't know how to go about getting it. And stayed in this marriage that she never should have stayed in. You know what I mean? And so that's why it's important for survivors of abuse, whether it's domestic violence and abuse or child abuse or whatever, to first of all, allow yourself to get some help. Like my mom really needed help. See, a counselor and therapist, and really get some help for her issues, and dad too, right? But they chose not to. And so that's really sad that they made that choice. 2 of my brothers killed themselves. One died of a drug overdose in a shelter here in Calgary. Another one hung himself, and he had tried to kill himself before, slit his wrists, and he was a heavy-duty cocaine addict. But people just blamed the drugs, and they said, oh, well, they were just drug addicts, they were just losers and stuff. And I remember them growing up, I remember growing up in a home with them and watching how my dad was treating them and thinking, no wonder, as an adult looking back on it, thinking, no wonder they did what they did. I turned to drugs as well from the age of 12 to 21. So, I know all about this stuff, right, and how harsh it is. And I used to do a lot of drugs, I didn't just used to do a little bit of drugs. I used to do massive amounts of drugs. I used to work, 2-3 jobs. I always worked to pay for my drugs, I never stole to pay for I never got into the habit of ripping off to I was just able to hold down jobs and be a complete drug addict, you know what I mean? So that's the thing. it was so destructive. You know what I mean? It was so incredibly destructive on my young body, which I was already being abused, not being looked after, born, into a bad situation, born like 3 months early, a preemie baby, a sick little kid, right? And then to have this stuff happen, it certainly has put a huge jeopardization on my life. And you know what I mean? It's like, people will say, well, no, you should just be able to get over it. It's like, well, okay, you come and live in my shoes for about 10 minutes, and we'll just see how you can get over it. You know what I mean? That's why I don't, people that say stuff like that, I don't pay much attention to them because, well, okay, whatever, buddy. You know what I mean? You want to be real or just buzz off, right? And the thing is that a lot of people just don't care. And if they don't care, well, there's not much you can do about that, right? Some people just really don't care about anything. You know what I mean? And for those people, I would just say, buzz off and go find some other show to listen to because, there's a lot of people out here who do really care about people and do want to make a difference in this world, one way or another. And, for the issues of child abuse, and abuse against humanity, right? Abuses against the human race. This is ridiculous that we still have all these incredibly sick people out here who think that it's perfectly okay to do what they do to people, to hurt them, to abuse them, to kill them, kidnap them, rape them, sexually use them, exploit them. The whole issues with the child sexual exploitation and sex trafficking, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. And so, I don't pay much attention to people who come up to me and have something derogatory to say about speaking out against abuse, or standing up, for children's rights, because they just take away from the main purpose of what a lot of us are trying to do out here, which is make this world a better place. And so the only way you're going to do that is to change the hearts and minds of people. And, it is really, the whole issue is, it's an issue of the heart. You know what I mean? People would not be doing what they're doing to their children, parents or caregivers and other sick individuals would not be doing what they're doing to children if they actually would look inside their heart and realize that, hey, they got to change their behavior and stop hurting their families, stop hurting their children and, raise their children properly, right? But people are very, very ignorant. And you see some of these people out here in these headlines, these child abuse headlines. We cover these on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio. And they look so crazed, to me. I know because I grew up with crazy people. And, honestly, people that were out of their minds, insane to do what they would do to their families and to their children. Like my dad tried to drive me and my sister out over a cliff one time because he was going to commit suicide. And, and then people think, oh, your dad is so cool. It's like, right, okay. Where'd you get that one from? You know what I mean? It's like, okay. Yeah, he used to run down the freeway and try to kill himself in the middle of the night. He was absolutely insane. And, and then people say, oh, your parents were so wonderful. After my mom practically cracked, well, she did crack my head open with a rolling pin and, abused me horrifically. And people would be like, well, your mom was so cool and she used to bake cookies and stuff. It's like, who cares about the cookies, man? She could have killed me. And she did kill me, actually. She killed my very spirit and soul. But I got it back, thank God. You know what I mean? And the whole issue is that's my fight. And that's exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's the whole issue of it's my fight to win this fight. And I decided that I was going to win this fight and have a good life and go on to be a whole, healthy person, you know what I mean? And not allow what my parents did to me, destroy my life. And so that's what, I'm hoping that if anybody's out there listening to this, that you'll do the same thing and allow yourself, to get help, to reach out, to heal, because you certainly didn't deserve to be treated like that, and no one does. And, so many people, they just almost, you have to just see it. You have to just get to a point where you think, no, I want to have a good life. I want to heal and to move forward and to win this fight, you know what I mean? And so I want to win this fight on behalf of all the abused children out there that ever were, and I want to win this fight against child abuse. And so in order to do that, I got to stick around. And so I made a commitment to myself, and I said, you know what, I deserve so much better, and so do these poor kids out here who are being abused, right, and other people too, right, people in domestic violence situations and whatnot. Make sure you get some help if you're in this situation, even if you have to call the crisis line anonymously, whatever you have to do, just do something, reach out and get some help, from somebody who's qualified who can help you, and, don't allow yourself to be abused and suffer, and if you know a child's being abused, you got to do the right thing, and if you know It's the law. You have to report it. If you suspect abuse, you should report it because you could be the only one that will report it. You could save a child's life. Very important. We have about 10 seconds. So again, I appreciate it. I'll be back on the weekend here, Saturday and Sunday, and then also next week with One Child Abuse Survivor to another back on Monday, 6 o'clock, same time, same place. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great night. Talk to you real soon. Take good care of yourselves. Bye.